Good evening and welcome to E-Bible Fellowship's Bible study in the book of Genesis. Tonight is study number 21 of Genesis chapter 19, and we're reading from verse 15. And when the morning arose, then the angels hastened Lot, saying, Arise, take thy wife and thy 2 daughters which are here, lest thou be consumed in the iniquity of the city. And while he lingered, the men laid hold upon his hand, and upon the hand of his wife, and upon the hand of his 2 daughters, Jehovah being merciful unto him, and they brought him forth and set him without the city. And I'll stop reading there. Now, we know this is a true historical occurrence that happened thousands of years ago, and God is giving us a record of some of the details of the events leading up to it and the actual destruction of the city of Sodom and the other cities of the plain. And so God had appeared the night before, and he came to the gate of the city, met with Lot, his righteous servant, spent the night at Lot's house after some very interesting situations with the men of the city Sodom. God struck them with blindness, so they wearied themselves to find the door and had to wander off. Then the Lord gave Lot instructions if he had any in the city beside these, that is, beside the 2 daughters who were with him and beside his wife. And he went to his sons-in-law and spent some time reasoning with them, trying to convince them of the tremendous need to flee out of the city. And yet he seemed as one that mocked unto them. And so we read in verse 15, and when the morning arose, then the angels hastened Lot, saying, Arise, take thy wife and thy 2 daughters which are here, lest thou be consumed in the iniquity of the city. The morning arose. And what that is indicating is that it was time in God's timetable for Sodom to be destroyed. You see, God allows for consultation, for checking things out, for searching the scriptures. He encourages that. As a matter of fact, he warns against just believing things without checking them out. And everything that a child of God hears, we should check them out. But also, there's a timetable for events. A timetable in which they unfold. And so God, for instance, opened up his word, the scriptures that had been sealed at the time of the end. And in, I believe it was the year 2001, information came forth concerning the end of the church age and the desperate need for the people of God to flee the churches and congregations of the world. And so that was in 2001. There was a time limit set upon it because the Lord also opened up information in his holy word, the Bible, to reveal a date for judgment, the final judgment of the world, May 21, 2011, which was 10 years or so from the time that he opened up the information regarding the end of the church age and the need to depart out of the midst of the congregations. And so many people heard the initial reports. The church age is over. We have to get out. Satan has been loosed. He's ruling in the congregations. God has departed out of the midst. And then they pondered, they thought about it, they discussed it, they reasoned amongst themselves, and did not act in 2001 or 2002. and some people have been hearing about it for years. 2005, 2008. Okay, there's still time for discussing these things and considering these things, but there was a tendency to linger when the command, even right from the start, was urgent. It was a desperately urgent command to get out of this place. And we're seeing elements of that in this historical parable with Lot and his family. And we can also see why it is that he did spend some time lingering, as God mentions, but we'll talk about that when we get to verse 16. So in verse 15, it says, "And when the morning arose, then the angels hastened Lot, saying, Arise, take thy wife and thy 2 daughters, which are here," not to be confused with the other daughters that are with their husbands. And these are the 2 virgin daughters. There was others that had been married. And properly, they had their own household. "Well, take thy 2 daughters, which are here, lest thou be consumed in the iniquity of the city." And you see the angels, who are, again, the messengers, a form of God appearing as these 2 men, hasten him. Now, the word hastened is a word that's found in several places. For instance, we read, "He that hasteth to be rich shall not be innocent." I believe this is a proverb. "Seeth a man hasty in his words, there is more hope of a fool than of him." And also the Bible indicates, "He that hasteth with his feet sinneth." In each one of those statements, to be hasty is a negative thing, not to be done. God's people are to be patient, wait upon the Lord. We're to pray for wisdom, pray for direction, and of course, search things out thoroughly, and not to be hasty with our feet, not to be hasty with our mouth, and so forth. And actually, in Exodus 5, verse 13, it says, "And the taskmasters hasted them," that is the Jews, "saying, Fulfill your works, your daily task, as when there was straw." They were hastening the Jews concerning the building of bricks, the making of bricks. And they had no straw. And so again, that would be a negative connection or a negative tie-in with the word haste. But it's the same word in all those references, all the quotes that I just gave, as this. Yet, of course, if God is hastening, and He is, it's not negative, it's not sinful in any way. There's reason and purpose. Reason and purpose. That the angels hasten Lot because the time had come. When you get close to the day of destruction, the day of judgment, when you get close to the fire and brimstone actually falling from heaven, obviously you have less and less time to do your research, to have lengthy discussions and so forth. There comes a time to act, and the good thing, the wonderful thing about that is that God's people hear His voice. They can discern the voice of Christ, and they know His voice, whereas they know not the voice of a stranger. And you see, God uses that when it comes to matters like this. Lot heard God's voice. He didn't need much convincing, did he? when these two men who were God in the form of two men appeared to him, he listened to what they said. Get you out of this place, we'll destroy the city. He believed them. Lot's sons-in-law were told the exact same thing. He did not believe the message. And that's what it comes down to between the elect and those that are not God's elect. The reprobate man, the unsaved individual, the natural-minded person, he has no ability to discern, to hear on a deeper level the voice of Christ and to know this is the voice of God. No, he actually tends to not believe things that are true. As Jesus said in John 8, you believe me not. Well, I can't remember it exactly, so let's see. John 8, verse 45, and because I tell you the truth, ye believe me not. So you see, this is the insurmountable problem for an unsaved individual faced with an urgent revelation of God, as the end of the church age was. Get out, and they hear it, and it doesn't ring true. It doesn't sound right to them in their ears. They cannot discern the voice of Christ, and they don't believe. Not because it's not true, but actually because it is true. If it were a lie, there'd be a greater tendency for them to believe it because they're of their father the devil, the father of lies. And when he speaketh a lie, he speaketh of his own, and man's heart is desperately wicked and deceitful above all things. So he's of the lie. He's inclined to the lie. He is open and perceptive to falsehood, whereas not so when it comes to the truth. And so we have a whole church world of wheat and tares that were hearing this information and dependent upon their spiritual condition, whether they were saved or not, is how they would react, how they would respond. Overall, although it was possible and did happen that a good number of unsaved people came out with the saved. So it wasn't that every elect or that every person that came out of the church was elect, but it was true that every elect did come out of the church who had been in the church. And then God had a later plan to deal with the non-elect, the unsaved, hangers-on who came out of the church, and he has been dealing with them ever since, actually, since May 21, 2011. But God's people hear his voice. Those that are not his people do not hear his voice. And as we got closer to May 21, 2011, and time was expiring, the urgency of the command to leave the congregation just got greater and greater. Well, the angels hasten Lot, saying, Arise, take thy wife and thy 2 daughters which are here, lest thou be consumed in the iniquity of the city. The word consumed is the same word that was translated as destroy back in Genesis 18 in verses 23 and 24. It said, And Abraham drew near and said, Wilt thou also destroy the righteous with the wicked? And the word destroy is this word consume. Peradventure, there be 50 righteous within the city. Wilt thou also destroy and not spare the place for the 50 righteous that are therein? So that's the word. This word is also found in Numbers 16 beginning in verse 24. Speak unto the congregation, saying, Get you up from about the tabernacle of Korah, Dathan, and Abiram. And Moses rose up and went unto Dathan and Abiram, and the elders of Israel followed him. And he spake unto the congregation, saying, Depart, I pray you, from the tents of these wicked men, and touch nothing of theirs, lest ye be consumed in all their sins. And that's exactly what's being said here to Lot and his family, this part of his family. If you don't go out of the city, there's a danger you'll be consumed in the iniquity of the city, in the sins of the city. And with this statement, God is letting us know without any question that there was no way for someone to remain behind and not to be destroyed or consumed along with the city. That is, if someone, let's say, declared, I believe the church age is over. I believe that God wants me to come out, but I'm saved. I'm a saved individual, and when you're saved, you can never lose your salvation. And so I'm going to stay back in order to talk to my family and others and try to convince them. And I'm just going to remain here, and I'll minister to people here from this location. Well, we can be certain that they were destroyed. And of course, when it came to the end of the church age and this matter of time running out on the command to depart out of the midst of the congregations, it was a spiritual destruction. Yet we can be certain they were spiritually destroyed along with all the other tares on the date of May 21, 2011. And that would mean that that individual, himself or herself, was a tare all along, despite his strong belief, unflinching belief that he was a child of God, yet through remaining behind, he was destroyed in the iniquity of the city, and it's impossible for God to destroy the righteous with the wicked. He only destroys the wicked, proving that that person was not truly saved, was not ever saved, and that's why he didn't flee. That's why he didn't get out. Not that leaving the church, and this should be underscored, not that leaving the church itself or coming out of a congregation, not that work saved anyone. I already said a good number of people that came out were not saved. So doing that action, and it was a good work because God commanded it to be done, and a good work is performing obedience to any of God's commands, and it was a good work that could not and did not and never possibly ever could save anyone. But God's elect performed that good work in obedience to the commandment of God because they were elect. And God gave them a spirit of discernment. Remember Ecclesiastes, a wise man's heart discerneth time and judgment. So Lot had a wise man's heart. He discerned the voice of Jehovah. This is true. This is going to happen. Therefore, we have to get out of the city. He discerned this is the time. He discerned this is the judgment of God and the need to flee. Whereas the sons-in-law and Lot's other daughters married to them had no such discernment. The men of Sodom had no such discernment. Likewise, those in the churches and the congregations. God's elect came out of the church because they were already saved, and as a result, they performed that particular good work. Others came out for various reasons who were not saved. Some individuals are very independent-minded people, and they like the idea of no longer being subject to pastors and elders and deacons, and no longer being subject to church authority and rule, and just being on their own. You see, it's very appealing to certain people, and it is the nature of a rebel, and mankind is in rebellion against God, to rebel against authority. And man does it against the authority of the Bible and God himself. And in this case, some natural-minded individuals who are proud and arrogant because they weren't saved. They saw opportunity to rebel against church authority, to come out and be their own authority. We should not think that they placed themselves under the authority of the Bible. That's impossible for an unsaved person to do. But they could then be their own authority and do what was right in their own eyes, teaching and believing whatever they thought the Bible said. And who's to say differently? Who's to say their understanding of the Bible is not true? You see, it was actually a good setting for a particular rebellious individual in that area to sort of have freedom in his rebellion, and also to have the cover of doing something right and proper and biblical and keeping a commandment of God. And yet they in heart were in open rebellion against God, and had nothing to do with trying to please him or keep Christ's commandments. They came out for other reasons and purposes. Well, okay, so it says here, take thy wife and thy 2 daughters which are here, lest thou be consumed in the iniquity of the city. And the staying in the city, of course, meant death. Nobody could stay and live, and there was no option for anyone to stay. You stay behind, you die. You go out, you could survive. You could live through the destruction of the city. Of course, there is another matter regarding Lot's wife that we'll look into later on. But insofar as this urgent command was concerned, go forth, get out of the city. Well, then in verse 16, and while he lingered, that is Lot, the men laid hold upon his hand, and upon the hand of his wife, and upon the hand of his 2 daughters, Jehovah being merciful unto him. And they brought him forth and set him without the city. And after everything we read, and what I was just saying about Lot and the nature of an elect child of God, we hear the voice of Christ. Lot heard the voice of God, understood it, knew it was true, and after all that, we would expect to read, and Lot made his way as quickly as possible out of the city. He took his 2 daughters and his wife, and according to the commandment of God, just immediately escaped, immediately left. And that's not what we read. Instead, we read that he lingered. While he lingered. And again, why? Why did Lot linger? And the answer is obvious, but we want to look to the Bible for understanding of this. And we'll spend some time looking into this. So we're going to wait until our next Bible study, and then, Lord willing, in our next study, we're going to look at the word lingered, and we'll look at some very possible reasons why Lot did linger, and we'll be able to relate it to the end of the church age once again.